Minutes earlier, Koga was strafing Dutch harbor. It was a chaotic, smoky raid intended to distract the American Navy from the real blow falling on Midway. But a single bullet, likely from a standard .50 caliber ground machine gun, or perhaps a lucky rifle shot from a terrified infantryman, found its way through the aluminum skin of the Zero. It severed the oil return line. Post-war forensic analysis of the wreckage confirmed the trajectory. The bullet did not hit the pilot. It hit the machine's circulatory system. Without oil, the 14-cylinder engine is seizing. The heat is building. Friction is welding the pistons to the cylinder walls. Koga has minutes, perhaps seconds, before the propeller stops spinning and his aircraft becomes a glider made of duralumin and fuel. He looks down. Through the swirling fog typical of the Aleutians, he sees Akutan Island. To a pilot's eye, specifically one trained on the hard-packed runways of the Imperial Navy, the valley floor of Broad Bight looks perfect. It is flat. It is wide. It is covered in lush green grass. It looks like a sanctuary. This is an optical illusion that will change the course of the Pacific War. Geological surveys of the Aleutian Islands reveal that this specific type of terrain is not solid ground. It is a peat bog, a soup of decaying vegetation and water hidden under a deceptive carpet of sedgegrass. It acts less like soil and more like quicksand. But from 1,000 feet, through a salt-stained canopy, Koga cannot see the water saturation. He sees a runway. He lowers the landing gear. This is the critical error. Standard emergency procedure for a water landing or rough terrain is a belly landing, keeping the wheels up to slide across the surface. But Koga believes the ground is hard. He drops the wheels. He lowers the flaps. He cuts the ignition to minimize the risk of fire. The silence of the slipstream takes over. The tires touch the green surface. They do not roll. They sink. The laws of physics execute the sentence immediately. The landing gear acts as a fulcrum. The momentum of the 3,500-pound aircraft, traveling at roughly 70 knots, has nowhere to go but forward and down. The tail whips up. The Zero flips onto its back with violent force. The canopy, designed for aerodynamics and visibility rather than structural protection, slams into the mud. It crushes. The medical reality of what happens next is preserved in the 1942 autopsy report conducted later by American military pathologists. Tadayoshi Koga did not drown. He did not suffer. The sudden deceleration and the crushing of the cockpit roof applied massive trauma to the cranium and cervical spine. His neck snapped instantly. He hangs upside down in his harness, dead before his brain can register the impact. Above him, the engine cools, hissing in the wet muck. The fuel tanks, remarkably, do not rupture. The fuselage remains largely intact. High above, the tragedy shifts from personal to strategic. Koga was not alone. Two wingmen, Chief Petty Officer Endo and Petty Officer Tsuguo Shikada, are circling the crash site. They watch their flight leader flip. They see the motionless aircraft belly up in the marsh. Imperial Japanese Navy doctrine is explicit regarding downed aircraft in enemy territory. Destroy the machine. The Zero is the Empire's most guarded technological secret. Its range, its maneuverability, and its lack of armor are classified state secrets that have allowed it to dominate the skies for 6 months. If a Zero falls, it must be strafed until it burns. Endo and Shikada drop their noses. They line up for the strafing run. Their thumbs hover over the firing buttons of their 7.7mm machine guns and 20mm cannons. They have the angle, they have the ammunition, but they do not fire. Scholars and historians debate the psychology of this moment. Some argue the wingmen believed Koga might still be alive, hanging unconscious in the straps, and they could not bring themselves to execute a comrade. Others suggest they assumed the crash was non-survivable, and the plane would sink into the bog, swallowing the evidence naturally. A Japanese intercepted radio message from the Ryujo flight group suggests confusion. They thought Koga might have made it. Whatever the internal reasoning, the result is recorded in the flight logs of the carrier Ryujo. The 2 Zeros pull up. They bank away from Akutan. They fly back to their carrier, leaving the wreckage smoking slightly in the cold drizzle. They believe the secret is safe. They believe the bog will consume the evidence. They are wrong. The bog does not consume the plane. It preserves it. The cold mud acts as a sealant, wrapping the engine and the airframe in a protective anaerobic embrace. The Japanese Navy has just left a fully intact, flight-capable Mitsubishi Zero lying in the American backyard. It is a technological Rosetta Stone waiting to be read. The fog rolls back in over Akutan. The wind howls through the valley, masking the location of the blue-grey metal skeleton lying inverted in the grass. For 5 weeks, the only visitors are foxes and seabirds. The war continues to rage thousands of miles south at Midway, where 4 Japanese carriers are burning, shifting the tide of the conflict. But the key to ensuring that tide never turns back is lying silent, cold, and upside down in the Alaskan mud. He thought he had found a safe place to land. Instead, he delivered the weapon that would kill his empire. A PBY Catalina, a lumbering amphibian patrol bomber belonging to Patrol Squadron 41, or VP-41, is pushing through the overcast sky. At the controls is Lieutenant William Thies. He is not hunting, he is navigating. The Aleutians are notorious for weather that kills more pilots than enemy flak, and Thies is reportedly lost, or at least disoriented, searching for a break in the cloud cover to verify his position relative to Dutch Harbour. The sensory experience of a PBY cockpit is one of overwhelming vibration and noise, a constant assault on the inner ear. But visual acuity is the currency of survival. Thies is scanning the ground, looking for rock formations, coastlines, anything to match a chart. He looks down at Akutan Island. He expects to see the chaotic geometry of volcanic rock and marsh. Instead, he sees a geometric anomaly, a straight line, a perfect, unnatural curve. In his personal diary, referenced later in Naval Historical Archives, Thies describes the moment not as a military triumph, but as a visual confusion. He sees something that does not belong in the natural order of the tundra. It is a shape. It is inverted. It is lying in the grass near the base of the Akutan volcano. He banks the heavy flying boat to take a closer look. From 1,500 feet, the object resolves. It is not a rock. It is an aircraft. But it is not American. The silhouette is wrong. The wings are tapered differently than a Wildcat or a P-40. And then, the colour hits him. It is a pale, sickly grey-green, contrasting sharply against the dark peat. On the wings, visible even through the mist, are the large red discs of the Hinomaru, the rising sun. This is a Japanese Zero. A standard combat report from VP-41 confirms the time and location. Thies alerts his crew. Machinist mate Albert Knack scrambles to the blister window. The tension inside the Catalina spikes. Is it a trap? Is it an active crash site with survivors armed with Nambu pistols? Or is it a grave? Thies drops lower. He circles the site. The psychology of this moment is pivotal. Most pilots, trained on the hate and fear of the previous 6 months, Pearl Harbor, Wake Island, the Coral Sea, would have an instinctive urge to strafe, to riddle the enemy corpse with .50 caliber rounds to ensure it is dead. But Thies stays his hand. He notices something that the Japanese wingmen, 5 weeks earlier, had missed in their panic. The plane is not a charred wreck. It is structurally whole. The wings are attached. The fuselage is unburned. It looks less like a crash and more like a specimen pinned to a mounting board. The crew takes photographs. These grainy black and white images, now preserved in the National Archives, show the Zero lying belly up, like a dead beetle. The landing gear protrudes awkwardly into the air. The visible damage is minimal, a crushed canopy and a bent propeller. Thies understands instantly that this is not just a kill, it is a robbery in progress. He marks the coordinates on his kneeboard chart. He turns the Catalina back toward Dutch Harbour, racing against the closing weather window. When he lands, the debriefing is skeptical. Intelligence officers are accustomed to pilot exaggeration. The fog of war often turns shadows into battleships. But Thies insists. He has the coordinates. He has the eyewitnesses. He persuades his commanding officer to authorize a recovery mission. The significance of this persuasion cannot be overstated. A report from the Naval Intelligence Unit dated late July 1942 highlights that Allied technical knowledge of the Zero at this point was based almost entirely on speculation, combat observation, and the fragmented remains of shot-down aircraft. They had pieces. They had theories. They did not have a working machine. The next day, Thies returns, this time leading a recovery team. They land the PBY in the water near the island and take a rubber raft to the shore. The approach on foot is slow. The ground, as Koga discovered too late, is treacherous. The sailors sink to their knees in the mud. As they crest the rise and see the plane up close, the reality of the prize becomes physical. The smell of high-octane aviation fuel still lingers, mixed with the sulphurous decay of the bog. They approach the inverted cockpit. The glass is shattered. Inside, held by the safety harness, is the body of Tadayoshi Koga. He is small. He is still wearing his flight suit. The decomposition, slowed by the cold temperatures and the peat, has been minimal. He is not a monster. He is a 19-year-old boy suspended in a cage of aluminum. The recovery team cuts the harness. They remove Koga's body. This is a grim, tactile task, the intimate handling of the enemy dead. They search his pockets. They find small personal items, intelligence maps, and flight tables. These are catalogued in the intelligence manifest for the North Pacific Force. But the body is secondary. The team turns their attention to the machine. They inspect the wing spars. They check the engine mounts. They realize, with a growing sense of awe and greed, that the aircraft is essentially unbroken. The mud that killed Koga saved his plane. It cushioned the impact like a giant wet glove. Thies and his men stand in the rain, looking at the blue ghost in the grass. They know they have found something important, but they cannot yet quantify the scale of it. They do not know that they are standing next to the death warrant of the Imperial Japanese Navy Air Arm. Finding the plane was a stroke of blind luck, a navigational error that turned into an intelligence coup. But identifying the prize is the easy part. The hard part is physics. They now have to drag a delicate 3,000-pound airframe out of a suction-heavy bog without snapping it in half, transport it across the ocean, and hand it to engineers who are itching to tear it apart. The plane is quiet now, but the autopsy is about to begin. The mission is commanded by Lieutenant Robert Taylor. His problem is not political, it is purely mechanical. He is staring at a 3,700-pound machine that is upside down, half buried, and structurally delicate. The Mitsubishi Zero was built for speed and range, not for durability. Its skin is thin. Its bones are light. If they pull too hard, the suction of the bog will win, and the airframe will snap in half. Engineering reports from the salvage operation detail the precarious nature of the lift. The team cannot simply hook a cable to the tail and pull. The Zero's wings are not bolted on separately like American fighters. The wing spars are integral to the fuselage, a single-piece construction that gives the plane its immense strength in the air, but makes it a nightmare to move on the ground. They construct a wooden skid. They erect a heavy tripod derrick over the carcass of the plane. The sound of the operation is the groan of timber and the clicking of ratchets. Before the machine can be saved, the human element must be discarded. The body of Tadayoshi Koga has already been removed, but he is still present on the island. The salvage crew digs a shallow grave on a nearby knoll. It is a utilitarian burial. There are no honors. There is no chaplain. A salvage log from the North Pacific Force notes the location simply as a necessity of hygiene and morale. They bury him to get him out of the way. They plant a simple wooden marker. Koga, the 19-year-old who inadvertently handed the keys to the Pacific War to his enemies, is left behind in the cold soil of Alaska. His war is over. The war of his machine is just beginning. The focus returns to the aluminum skeleton. The team attaches the cables to the main wing spars. This is the moment of highest risk. The bog has created a vacuum seal around the wings. Metallurgical analysis conducted later at Wright Field would identify the specific alloy of the Zero's frame as extra super duralumin, a zinc-aluminum-magnesium alloy developed by Sumitomo Metals. It is incredibly strong for its weight, lighter than anything the Americans are using, but it is susceptible to corrosion and brittle under specific stress loads. If the mud holds and the crane pulls, the zinc-heavy spars will shatter. The winch turns. The cables tighten. The wire rope sings under the tension. The fuselage groans. It is the sound of metal protesting against geology. Slowly, with a sucking wet tear, the bog releases its grip. The Zero rises. It drips black slime. It is a ghost rising from the grave. The vertical stabilizer is crushed. The canopy is gone. The propeller is bent back like a curled fist. But the spine of the aircraft, the main spar, is straight. The team lowers it onto the wooden skid. They are exhausted, covered in oil and muck, but they have done the impossible. They have retrieved the enemy intact. The logistics of the next 48 hours are preserved in the transport manifests of the US Navy. A bulldozer drags the skid over the tundra to the shoreline. It is loaded onto a barge. From the barge, it is transferred to the USS St. Mihiel, a transport ship headed for Seattle. As the crane on the St. Mihiel hoists the Zero onto the deck, the canvas tarps are lashed down tight. Security is absolute. The sailors on board are told not to speak of the cargo. Rumors fly that it is a secret American prototype, that it is a German Messerschmitt. Few know the truth. They are ferrying the myth of Japanese invincibility packaged in a wooden crate. Upon arrival in Seattle, the aircraft is loaded onto a flatbed truck. To hide its identity, the distinctive round fuselage is covered and the wings are boxed. The convoy moves south, down the coast towards San Diego. It travels at night to avoid prying eyes. It arrives at the North Island Naval Air Station in mid-August. The crate is delivered to a restricted hangar. The doors are locked. Armed MPs are stationed at the perimeter. Inside, the lights are turned on. A team of master mechanics and engineers is waiting. These are men who have spent the last year looking at photos of Zeros, looking at gun camera footage of Zeros destroying American wildcats. Now, they can touch it. They circle the muddy, battered airframe. They run their hands over the flush rivets, noting the aerodynamic smoothness that American planes lack. They peer into the wheel wells. They look at the engine, the Nakajima Sakai, still caked in Aleutian peat. They are about to perform an autopsy on a machine that is still alive. The body is buried in Alaska, but the brain of the Zero, the engine, the flight controls, the fuel system, is right here on the concrete floor, and they are going to wake it up. The salvage is complete. The resurrection is next. Mechanics in grease-stained dungarees are swarming over it. They are not treating it with the reverence of a museum piece. They are treating it with the ruthless curiosity of surgeons dissecting a new species. They are stripping it down to the bolts. Every wire is traced. Every rivet is inspected. And as the layers come off, the myth of the invincible Zero begins to dissolve into a collection of engineering compromises. The first shock comes when they remove the pilot's seat. American fighters like the Wildcat or the P-40 are built like tanks. They have heavy steel plates behind the pilot's head and back to stop machine gun bullets. The mechanics lift the Zero's seat and find nothing. There is no armor. There is no steel plate. There is only a thin sheet of aluminum, barely thick enough to stop a screwdriver, let alone a .50 caliber round. Tadayoshi Koga had been sitting in a folding lawn chair at 20,000 feet. They moved to the wings. They opened the inspection panels to check the fuel tanks. In 1942, standard US Navy doctrine requires self-sealing fuel tanks, rubber-lined containers that swell when punctured to stop leaks and prevent explosions. A report from the Technical Air Intelligence Unit filed during the restoration notes the composition of the Japanese tanks with stark clinical detachment. They are not rubber, They are tin. They are completely unprotected. If an incendiary bullet hits a Zero's wing tank, it does not leak, it detonates. The mechanics realize they are looking at a flying Molotov cocktail. This is the secret of the Zero's range. By stripping out the armor, the self-sealing liners, and the heavy electric starters, Mitsubishi saved nearly 500 pounds of weight. That weight saving allowed them to carry more fuel and fly 3 times farther than any American fighter. But the cost was total vulnerability. The restoration process is grueling. The damage from the flip at Akutan is severe. The vertical stabilizer is crushed, and the landing gear struts are twisted. But the biggest problem is the wing itself. US maintenance logs from the project detail a frustration that bordered on hatred for the Japanese designers. On an American plane, if a wing is bent, you unbolt it and attach a new one. The Zero is different. The wings and the fuselage are built as a single integrated unit, a semi-monocoque design. You cannot simply swap a wing. You have to rebuild the entire airframe structure. Mechanics are forced to become artisans. They cannot order parts from Tokyo. They have to fabricate them by hand. They beat new aluminum sheets into shape. They machine new fittings to match the metric specifications of the original. They straighten the bent propeller inch by inch, using cold pressure and prayer. Then there is the engine. The Nakajima Sakai 12 is hoisted out and placed on a test stand. It is a 14-cylinder, air-cooled radial engine, a masterpiece of compact efficiency. When they strip it down, they find the cylinders are packed with peat and sand from the bog. They clean every piston. They polish every valve. When they finally reassemble it and turn the starter crank, the engine coughs, smokes, and then catches. The sound is distinct, a lighter, sharper rhythm than the throaty roar of an American engine. It is alive. By mid-September, the surgery is complete. The plane is no longer grey-green. The Navy has painted it in standard US blue-grey camouflage. They have painted large white stars on the wings and fuselage, replacing the red rising suns. It looks like a captive wolf dressed in sheep's clothing. The intelligence officers stare at the finished product. They know its weight. They know its chemical composition. They know it has no armor and burns easily. But they still do not know how it feels. They do not know why it turns so tightly or climbs so fast. Physics on a notepad is one thing. Physics in the air is another. The plane looks whole again. It sits on the tarmac, gleaming under the California sun. But it is a Trojan horse. To unlock the final secrets, someone has to strap into the dead man's seat, truss the repaired spars, and take it into the sky. The mechanics wipe their hands on rags and step back. The autopsy is over. The interrogation flight is about to begin. Sanders is an experienced test pilot, a man trained to suppress imagination in favor of data. But as he climbs onto the wing root and steps into the cockpit, the ghost of Tadayoshi Koga is unavoidable. The ergonomics are intimate and alien. In post-war interviews, Sanders described the physical sensation of sitting in the Zero as claustrophobic. The cockpit was designed for a pilot standing 5'4", weighing perhaps 130 pounds. Sanders is an American male of average build, and he is wedged in. The rudder pedals feel too close. The stick feels too light. He scans the instrument panel. The original Japanese gauges have been calibrated or marked with tape, converting metric data into knots and feet, but the layout remains untouched. He is looking at the world through Koga's eyes. He signals the ground crew. The inertia starter winds up, a low whine that builds to a scream. The prop turns. The Nakajima Sakai engine catches with a burst of blue smoke. The vibration is immediate. It is not the deep, rumbling bass of an American Pratt & Whitney. It is a higher, tighter frequency. The whole airframe hums. It feels fragile, like a kite with an engine strapped to the front. Sanders releases the brakes. The Zero taxis lightly. It wants to fly. The Bureau of Aeronautics report titled Flight Test of the Mitsubishi Model Zero Fighter, filed in October 1942, documents the takeoff performance with clinical precision. but the dry numbers fail to capture the shock Sanders experiences the moment he pushes the throttle forward. In an American Wildcat, takeoff is a labor. You have to muscle the heavy plane into the air. In the Zero, it is a release. The aircraft weighs nearly half as much as its US counterparts. After a roll of only a few hundred feet, it leaps off the concrete. Sanders is airborne. He climbs, and as he clears the haze layer at 2,000 feet, he realizes why American pilots are terrified. It is the visibility. In a Wildcat, the pilot sits deep inside a fuselage with a high spine behind him. Rear visibility is blocked by armor plate and structure. It is like flying while wearing a tunnel vision helmet. In the Zero, the canopy is a teardrop of glass. Sanders turns his head. He can see the tail. He can see the wings. He can see the entire sky behind him. There are no blind spots. There is nowhere for an enemy to hide. He feels exposed, yet omnipotent. He levels off at 10,000 feet and tests the controls. He moves the stick gently to the left. The response is instantaneous. The Zero rolls with a fluidity that defies physics. It requires no muscle. He describes it later as fingertip control. The plane feels like an extension of his own nervous system. He thinks a turn, and the machine turns. He pulls back on the stick. The nose rises. He climbs at nearly 3,000 feet per minute, a rate that leaves the standard US Navy fighter gasping for air below him. For the first time, American intelligence understands the tactical reality of the Pacific. They had assumed Japanese pilots were superhuman samurai, possessed of supernatural situational awareness. They were wrong. The pilots were human. It was the machine that gave them the eyes of a hawk and the agility of a swallow. Sanders spends the next hour seduced by the aircraft. He performs loops, chandelles, and tight turns. He is dancing with the enemy. It is intoxicating. The Zero makes him feel like the best pilot in the world. It whispers to him that speed and armor are unnecessary when you can move like this. But this seduction is a trap. The Japanese design philosophy was built on the assumption that a dogfight happens at slow speeds, a turning war where agility is king. Koga believed this. The designers at Mitsubishi believed this. And for an hour, Sanders believes it too. He prepares to land. He floats the feather-light plane down to the runway, touching down at a speed that feels impossibly slow. He taxis back to the hangar, the adrenaline still spiking in his blood. The mechanics swarm the plane again. Sanders climbs out, sweating, his knees cramping from the tight quarters. He writes his initial report. It is glowing. The Zero is a masterpiece of aerodynamics. But Sanders is a scientist of violence. He knows that in war, perfection is usually a facade. He suspects that the Zero's incredible low-speed compliance comes at a price. He has tested the plane on its own terms, gentle, acrobatic, slow. Tomorrow, he decides to stop flying it like a Japanese pilot and start flying it like an American. He decides to take it up to 15,000 feet, point the nose at the ocean, and push the throttle past the red line. He is charmed by the plane's agility, but he is about to discover that the Zero has a split personality, and the other side is not agile. It is paralyzed. He advances the throttle. The Sakai engine screams, its pitch rising to a frantic mechanical shriek. The airspeed indicator, marked with white tape over the original Japanese characters, begins to climb. 180 knots, 200 knots, 250 knots. The vibration changes. The delicate, hollow hum of the airframe turns into a shudder. The wind noise against the thin canopy drowns out the engine. Sanders is traveling at nearly 300 miles per hour. He is entering the flight envelope where American fighters, like the heavy, brick-shaped Wildcat, begin to feel stable. He decides to execute a hard right bank. It is a standard evasive maneuver. At 150 knots, he could do this with 2 fingers. He pushes the stick to the right. Nothing happens. The stick resists. It does not feel like a mechanical lever connected to cables and pulleys. It feels like it is set in wet concrete. Sanders applies more force. He uses his shoulder. He grips the stick with both hands and shoves. The aircraft responds with a sluggish, reluctant tilt. The legendary acrobat of the Pacific, the machine that could turn inside a dime, has suddenly become a paralyzed brick. Sanders levels out, his heart rate spiking. He climbs back up and tries it again. Dive, speed, roll. The result is the same. At high speeds, the Mitsubishi Zero refuses to fight. The data Sanders collects that afternoon is later converted into a chart titled Stick Force per G, included in the official Bureau of Aeronautics report, Flight Test of the Mitsubishi Model Zero Fighter. The graph shows a catastrophic degradation of performance. The engineering reason for this failure is ironic. The Japanese designers gave the Zero enormous ailerons, the hinged flaps on the trailing edge of the wings, to give it incredible agility at low speeds. They wanted a sword fighter, but they did not install hydraulic boosters. At 250 knots, the air pressure flowing over those massive control surfaces is so immense that a human pilot simply lacks the physical strength to move them against the slipstream. The air itself locks the plane in a straight line. This is the crossover point. Sanders realizes that the Zero is two different aircraft. Below 200 knots, it is a dragon, lethal and untouchable. Above 200 knots, it is a victim. This discovery changes the geometry of the war. Until this moment, American pilots believed they were outmatched in every quadrant. But Sanders has just proven that the F-4F Wildcat, often derided as a Grumman Ironworks tub, possesses a critical advantage. Its smaller, hydraulically assisted controls remain effective at diving speeds. Sanders writes in his log that the Zero's inability to roll at high speed means a pilot cannot reverse a turn. If a US pilot attacks from above, diving at 300 knots, and misses, the Zero cannot follow the roll. It is physically impossible for the Japanese pilot to twist his machine to match the American trajectory. The psychological weight of this finding is immense. It transforms the enemy from a supernatural force into a solvable physics problem. The invincible Zero is actually a specialized tool with a glaring, fatal limitation. But the interrogation is not over. Sanders has found the shield, the way to survive a Zero attack by keeping speed high. Now, he wants to find the sword. He wants to know how to kill it. He climbs again. The engine is running hot. He's going to try something that every pilot is taught never to do in a carbureted engine. He's going to simulate a panic dive, a maneuver that subjects the aircraft to negative G-forces. He pushes the stick forward violently. The world flips, gravity reverses, and then the silence comes. Sanders pulls back on the stick. He levels the plane. As gravity reasserts itself, turning from negative to positive, the Nakajima Sakai engine coughs. A burst of blue smoke spits from the exhaust stacks. Then, with a violent shudder, the cylinders catch fire again. The roar returns. He climbs back to altitude, his pulse hammering in his neck. He needs to verify what just happened. He pushes the nose down again, hard. A bunt. The negative G-force lifts him out of his seat against the straps, and instantly, the engine dies. Sanders has just discovered the mechanical Achilles heel of the Imperial Japanese Navy. The specific failure mechanism is documented in the interim report on the performance of the Type Zero fighter, submitted to the Bureau of Aeronautics in late October 1942. The Nakajima engine uses a float-type carburetor. It functions like the tank in a domestic toilet. A small float controls the valve that lets fuel into the mixing chamber. It relies on gravity. When the plane flies level or pulls positive Gs in a turn, gravity pulls the fuel down, and the float works perfectly. But when a pilot pushes the nose down violently, negative gravity takes over. The fuel floats up, the valve closes, the engine starves. Sanders realizes the tactical implication immediately. It is a geometry of survival. If an American pilot in a Wildcat or a Corsair is being chased by a Zero, he cannot outturn it. If he tries to bank and turn, the Zero will cut inside him and kill him. But if the American pilot simply pushes the stick forward and dives instantly, the Zero cannot follow. If the Japanese pilot tries to bunt and follow the dive, his engine will cut out. He will be left floating, powerless, while his target escapes into the deep blue below. To dive, the Zero pilot must first roll inverted and then pull back on the stick to maintain positive gravity, a maneuver that takes 2 or 3 vital seconds. In an aerial dogfight, 3 seconds is an eternity. It is the difference between a kill and a clean escape. This is not a theory. It is a mechanical certainty built into the enemy's fuel system. Sanders spends the rest of the flight testing the limits of this flaw. He maps the duration of the engine cutout. He confirms that the Wildcat, with its Bendix pressure-injected carburetor, which forces fuel into the engine with pumps regardless of gravity, can dive indefinitely without a hiccup. The disparity is almost comical. The American plane is a brick, heavy and unrefined, but its heart pumps blood in any orientation. The Japanese plane is a ballerina, graceful and light, but it faints if you move it the wrong way. When Sanders lands, the debriefing room is charged with a different kind of energy. The fear is evaporating. The engineers and intelligence officers are no longer looking at a monster. They are looking at a machine with a bad carburetor and stiff ailerons. They draft the tactical bulletin immediately. Tactical Bulletin number 124, Combating the Zero, issued to the Pacific Fleet in late 1942, contains the distilled wisdom of the Akutan tests. It does not speak in generalities. It gives specific instructions. Do not dogfight the Zero. Never attempt to turn with the Zero at low speed. Use high speed. Attack from above. Dive to escape. The report travels from San Diego to Pearl Harbor, and from Pearl Harbor to the carrier decks of the Enterprise, the Saratoga, and the Hornet. It is read by squadron commanders in humid briefing rooms. It is memorized by young pilots who have spent months terrified of the blue ghost. They are told, he cannot roll at high speed. He cannot dive without his engine quitting. He has no armor. He has no self-sealing tanks. Sanders has given them a checklist for murder. He has taken the unknown variables of combat and turned them into a flowchart. But the final test is yet to come. The data is solid. The tactics are sound, but the war is not fought in a test flight over San Diego. It is fought in the chaotic, bloody skies of the Solomon Islands and the Central Pacific. The question remains, can average pilots, terrified and exhausted, execute this calculated algorithm of slaughter when the tracers are flying? Sanders signs off on the final report. The Akutan Zero is pushed to the back of the hangar. Its job is done. It has betrayed its creators. It has whispered its secrets to the enemy. Now the American industrial machine will take those secrets and build a new generation of fighters, the Hellcat, specifically designed to exploit every single weakness Sanders has found. The test pilot walks away from the captured plane. He knows that thousands of miles away, young Japanese men are strapping into Zeros, believing they are invincible. They do not know that their death warrant has already been signed, sealed, and mimeographed in a California office. They do not know that the sky belongs to the engineers now. The mystery is gone. The execution is about to begin. 2 years earlier, a single Zero could scatter a formation of American fighters simply by turning into them. The psychological weight of that silhouette, the tapered wings, the bubble canopy.